Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I warmly welcome everyone on behalf of Team Harriet. This is going to be our second webinar of our webinar series. So, if there anyone who do not know about Harriet, Harriet is the Sri Lanka's largest fashion and beauty marketplace at the moment. We have nearly 65 fashion brands on board with us. And also, is there any students, new fashion designers, new fashion entrepreneurs who willing to join with us? Please keep in touch with us. And moving on to the webinar, our resource person today is Mr. Malik Ahamadeen. Malik's career started in 2005 as a general manager at MA Synergy, and in 2008 he became the business director for Nike brand at MAS. In 2015 he was appointed as chief marketing officer for MAS Active. Currently, he is working as Chief Growth Officer for MS Holdings and MS Country Lead for India. We warmly welcome you, Malik.
Thank you, Dinusha, and good evening, everybody. Great to be here, and I'm looking forward to this session. We've got a whole heap of slides that we have put together for you, but at the same time, Dinusha, are we taking questions at the end, or do
Yes,
you want the audience?
yeah,
Yeah.
small note for the audience. Like, if you have any questions in between, you can put a note in the chat box. So, end of the webinar, we will ask it for Malik.
All right. Thank you very much. So let's get started, Dinusha.
Okay, so Malik, moving to the first question. So, as we all know, we are in the middle of 2014. We have passed many issues like COVID and economic crisis in Sri Lanka, and currently there are a lot of political crisis going on around the world. So, how you see these kind of scenarios will affect the fashion industry in general, like global and also the in Sri Lankan market?
Yes, Dinusha, I think very relevant question. The world has gone through multiple crises in the last 5 years. I think we all are aware of the COVID situation that changed markets completely, not just from the consumer side, but also from the retail and how brands perceive the market and how they buy, in turn, how they sell in retail changed completely. If you look at economic crisis, which followed COVID, I think Sri Lanka was one of the countries badly hit. Uh, but the world will never be the same again. So that's the previous slide. If you just go back, I put that, the one before this, is in 2008, 2009, 2010, the world went through a similar crisis. Not a COVID crisis, but an economic crisis. And I believe the crisis that we have gone through now in the last 4 years may be even more significant than that. So some of you on the call may have been very young in 2008, 9, 10, but for others who have been in business or have been in the workforce, you know how bad the 2009 and 10 crisis was. I believe that the current crisis that we went through or is still going through is much worse than that. So just for comparison and magnitude of the issue that we are in the middle of. Dinesh, if you just click to the next slide, I'll just tell you a few things that are happening around the world or has happened also in maybe 2023 and how I see 2024. Some of the key things, three or four big things. On the left of the screen, I'm talking about conflicts around the world. I'm only showing one conflict on this, the Russia-Ukraine conflict, but more recently, we have seen a bigger conflict in the Middle East that may affect trade, business, political climate, espionage, all of that. So there has been a lot of conflict in the last 3-4 years and is still going on. Point number two on the left is the US imports. So countries like Sri Lanka, we depend on the American economy and how the consumer buys there in the United States. Most of our shipments in apparel textile goes to the US as a country. So when they are in some kind of trouble or if they get a cold, we in Sri Lanka, we catch pneumonia. So because of that, we have to keep watching the US economy and how US buys apparel from around the world. So one key thing we saw is that the US apparel imports dropped by about 20%. That's a huge drop. So US buys not only from Sri Lanka, they buy from China, from most of the other countries that ship apparel, textile. There was an import drop. So that means there is a financial crisis, or the buying power has reduced in the US. So that is impacting the world. The last one on the left is the UK and EU has various inflation issues. They got caught up due to the Ukrainian war, gas issues, joblessness. The markets were not stable, and which meant that there is low discretionary spending for people. People were more, what can I say? They were taking care of essentials that they had to for their living. So that's what 2023 looked like. But if you take 2024, there is still hope. If you take Asia, for instance, so Asia, we see China still growing, but growing a little slower. But even slower growth, still China is a very significant market. But the one to watch is India. India is China 20 years ago, and the fastest growing economy in the world today. And India being next to Sri Lanka as a neighbor, I think we stand to gain from that. So one to watch in 2024, 2025 is India. If you take the second half of 24, we believe that there will be some interest rate cuts around the world, and some of the economies will show a little bit of turnaround, in the US included. A few other things are freight rates. You have to keep watching. There were various things that happen in the Red Sea that may increase insurances in freight and things like that. That has an impact on business. But finally, on the right, one of the key things that's happening in the world right now is elections. There are 43 countries around the world, which is equal to about 3.5 billion people are going into elections this year, 2024. So generally, if there are elections, that has a huge impact on business. So this is just a global outlook, just to give you just a sense of where things are. If I just continue to the next slide.
Okay.
So looking at, so what does this mean? Consumers are prioritizing their spending, essentials over fashion. Fashion we can do without, but paying your mortgage, paying your heating, paying your car loans and other things become a priority. So that means sometimes you might be buying less fashion items, which might be discretionary spending. So that's one on the left. The second one is the market is now pushing for value and asking for better products at the same value. So what does that mean? That means they are now demanding for the same price something more. Maybe sustainability, maybe style, maybe innovation, or how you deliver to them, or how fast you deliver. It's a buyer's market. So the buyer is now demanding these things. They're asking for more value. So I think that's an important one for the audience. Finally, on the left, there are two things that you may be hearing or reading lately is traceability. The customers want to know, where is this product coming from? Where is the fabric coming from? Or where is the yarn coming from for that? Or where did you buy the cotton? So on. So is it responsible? Did you buy it from a country which is responsible, or a state or city that is responsible? So people are becoming more aware, the consumers. If you look at the right, there are a few factors. The brands, in turn, are losing market share. The big brands, will say Nike may be losing market share. Adidas may be losing market share. The example I have here is Victoria's Secret. If you all have heard of that brand, is a very, very powerful lingerie brand in the US, has global presence now, is losing market share. we looked at how much market share they lost in the last couple of years. They would have lost about $1 billion worth of market share. And we felt that smaller brands, Airy is a smaller brand, they grew by about 1 billion. So some of the bigger brands may be losing some market share to more exciting smaller brands. So that's something to watch overall around the world. The buying trends have changed. Brands are not buying and stocking up anymore. There is no room for inventory to be piled up and kept for months, and struggle to sell through at full price. So which means inventory management has become a key activity for all the brands. And there's something we call blind buying. That means the brands are buying too early without exactly knowing what color, what size, what style will sell. So they will be very careful not to blind buy in the future and manage their inventory well. Finally, there is also hope for Western brands who are going into Asian markets, and there is also hope for Eastern brands who are going into the Western market. So I'll give you two examples. One Western brand example is you may have Nike, which is a famous American sports brand that may be going to China, Cambodia, Vietnam. They may be selling in Indonesia, Australia. So they're coming to this part of the world. Is the Western brand coming to Asia? What is the Eastern brand that may be going to the West? Uniqlo, for instance. Uniqlo is a very famous Japanese brand that we all know, is now venturing out into North America. So there is room for growth for them. And we believe they will grow very, very fast in the next 5 to 10 years. So you see these international brands moving countries. They're going into each other's territories and maybe taking on market share from each other also. So that's an important one to remember, how the brands are managing the markets and penetrating new markets. Dinusha, if we move to the next one.
Yes.
So Sri Lanka, just a quick one on Sri Lanka. So apparel exports, we export the most to the United States, but we had a target of around 5.5 billion. But it looks like in 23 we stopped at 4.5, and it looks like even 24 will be just below the 5 billion mark. So we have recovered a bit from 2 years ago where we had a big drop, but still not where we would like it to be. In the second one on the left, the inflation has adjusted, the interest rates have dropped a little, and we believe that remittances are coming from our workforce in the Middle East and overseas. We are seeing tourism go up, which will help us get more dollars for the country and so on. But having said that, our debt burden is still the same. We haven't still settled our overseas debt. So because of that, there may be an adjustment in the dollar again going forward. Right now, the dollar has got stronger against the rupee has got stronger against the dollar. It's around maybe 300, 310. But if you remember, 2 years ago, it went up as high as 360. So it has got a little stronger, but we are still not paying our debt. We haven't imported vehicles and things like that. So those may again change the situation. If you look at 2024, one of the exciting things that I am looking at is the Indian market. India is close to Sri Lanka. So why not we use that market for us to export into India? Traditionally, we have been shipping to the US, but maybe we should look at exporting to India. The second one is the perception of Sri Lanka. The political instability, economic instability, which didn't help us. I think the international stakeholders are now looking at Sri Lanka. Tourism is growing. So there's a perception change that is slowly happening, which will also be favorable for us. I think some of the key things on policy stability, the international community is looking at Sri Lanka to see whether our governance, labor reforms, how easy is it to do business. They are watching all of this. And I think one of the key things that will affect us is the global reset on pricing. So why is this happening? We mentioned that last couple of years, the demand dropped globally. So when the demand drops globally, there is an excess capacity that's available around the world that all the manufacturers, like Sri Lankan manufacturers, everyone in the world wants business to fill this manufacturing capacity. So because of that, the prices might drop because of the supply and demand. There's more no supply, there is more supply and less demand. So the prices have readjusted, and we will also have to now work with this new price point for less. So if there's a garment that we were selling for $10 last year, this year we may have to do it for $9 to maintain the same business. So that is very, very useful and important point for us to consider. I mentioned the power of three here is we are in an area of consolidation between India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka as a region, not Sri Lanka only as an individual country. So I think we have to look at that power of three. Some of the companies that Sri Lankan companies have businesses in India, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. So together as a region, they may be a little more stronger than only Sri Lanka. So I will stop there on that and maybe move to the next one.
Malik, the small
Yes.
question, since that we are clear that the manufacturing cost and raw material cost is going to be high, so how come a Sri Lankan brand adapt to that? Or maybe what kind of a design that they need to focus on if you are planning to launch within this year or next year? So what kind of designs that might have a demand in future?
Okay. So I think we were to talk about that earlier, but I will talk about it now. So basically, in the market where we had import restrictions in Sri Lanka, I think that's where the local retail now, there we are seeing the international brands that used to come to Sri Lanka. There was a stop in the last 2 years, 3 years with the import restriction. With that, we saw some very exciting Sri Lankan brands that came through the market, and some of these brands picked up. The whole idea, I think, in retail in Sri Lanka is to find out what the need is and at what price point. What price point are people willing to pay to fulfill this need? If these two match, you have a hit or a success, right? So I think two examples for me. One is a very exciting sports brand that we all know the name right now in Colombo has taken off. People are buying. So that means casual sportswear or sports wear that you actually don't actually sweat, but you're wearing that sportswear for a casual look. So that brand is doing really well in market right now. There are some other brands that have been around that are doing dressers, a little more dressy things. I know a few brands that are a little more niche, a little more tailored, that are also doing well. So I think the last 2 years have been good for Sri Lankan retail, and anybody who entered retail, there has been good success, Dinusha.
Okay.
So maybe
So,
there is a couple of slides later on also we can talk about that.
sure. And also a small reminder for the audience, like if you have a question in between, you can drop a message on the chat box. So we will ask questions at the end of the webinar. Let's move to the next question. So it's about the sustainability, Malik. So
Yeah.
now I think especially the Gen Z audience, they have a lot of demands. They like always ask like where this product came from, how the manufacturing works, is it healthy, is it healthy for our planet. So there are a lot of questions. So what's the importance of sustainability and the eco-friendly when you come to fashion business?
Okay, so maybe we'll move to the next couple of slides. There are a few on. If you Yes, so the one on the left, 2 points on the left, ESG. So what's happening in Europe? The European Union and Germany and a few countries who are taking the lead are going really, really hard on this now. They are saying if your products are not made in a sustainable way, if it's not using sustainable fabric, and if it's not responsible, and if it has no traceability, we won't buy it. So that's a very, very big statement from European Union. They are leading this charge, and we believe that once they start it, it will also be adopted by the US in the future. So a very, very big stand that they are taking on. So that means how we make material has to be responsible. It has to be sustainable, less carbon footprint, more recycle or more biodegradable and so on. And the European Union is taking a big stand on that. So we have to work with industry bodies then in these countries. They have to work with each other, because if Germany is not going to buy products which are not sustainable, that means they have to work with the bodies around the world to make sure that this message is clear. And how do you change? You can't just tell people, I'm not going to buy from you, without changing the process all the way down to where the cotton farmer is, or where the sustainable fabric is coming from, or what are those parameters, what's the standard, how we will audit you. So all of that has to change. So I think right now we are seeing a change where these changes are coming to us through our customers. How they will audit us in the future is changing, and so on. On the right, we are talking about how to benchmark and category focus. So earlier there were issues on brand to brand. We'll say, when you say Nike and Adidas, it's a big competition in the market. Now it's not just brand to brand. Now it's within the brand categories. We'll say Nike's tights versus Adidas tights, or Lululemon's tights versus another brand's tights. It's going down to the category level, where they are also battling it out to get category leadership, what we call category leadership. So how are they doing that? Again, they're using sustainability as a key pitch. They will say our fabric is 100% recyclable, or it's 100% organic, or something like that. So then that category leadership through fabric which are sustainable, they can get a bigger market share, and so on. I think innovation is going to be big. So everything that I just mentioned requires an innovation mindset to change, how the sustainability part. So sustainability and innovation go very, very close hand in hand. I think at the bottom, I have the right channel, aligning the right trends. So even in Sri Lanka or anywhere in the world, how do you position yourself? How much of your product goes in retail through brick and mortar stores, and how much of it is online? How much of it will be discounted? What trends are we going to pick in the future? Are we picking more styles, or are we picking less styles which will sell more? So I will repeat that again. Are we picking more styles that will be sold, or are we picking less styles, a few styles, but selling deeper and will be bought for longer? So that's also sustainable. If styles or styles that you put on the shelf are lasting longer, that means you're sustainable in how you design. That means you're sustainable in how you're selling through. Every time you're changing style season on season, that means your design process, your development process, your material change, your style change is also not eco-friendly. So in the future, there may be a requirement where these big fashion brands will go deep and be more sustainable, where the longevity of the style is important. So those are a few things, Dinusha, in that, and we can move forward.
Okay.
Yeah, so I will not go into this. So there is a direct link on, temperatures of the world, ocean plastic. If 1% of, if you just click to the next slide, if 1% of, I think going forward.
This one, right?
Let me see. Yeah, just go forward. Yeah, so this one. So if the temperature moves 1% in the world, there's a 54% chance of a conflict. So these are now almost scientific. So there are lots of data like this. If we click to the next slide, so global warming is a huge issue. Just to get a little more closer to our topic today, if you take every 5 garments that we produce in the world, 3 of it, the probability of 3 of it going to landfill is very, very high. So what does this mean? That means every time we produce a garment and we sell it at retail and somebody buys it, the chances of that being used and disposed, 3 out of it can go into a dustbin which goes into landfill. So landfill in apparel textile industry is probably the biggest issue around the planet. Some of the more responsible countries have good ways of incineration, how it will get recycled or upcycled back into fabric or yarn. There are multiple ways how we do it today. But just for you, just for the audience to know that 3 garments out of 5. So that means we are, as consumers, you and I, we also buy an amazing amount of garments. Should we buy responsibly? What does that mean? Is that buying less, or is it buying garments that can be degradable? What is that? So we need to also be responsible when we buy. So the incineration adds up to 1.2 billion tons of greenhouse gases a year. So this is huge. I will also talk a little bit about fabric, making of fabric. So the most unsustainable part of the apparel industry, from the time you pick the yarn to when the consumer is using it and washing it at home in the washing machine, in this whole life cycle, there is unsustainable things that happen. Water gets used everywhere. But the most amount of water that we consume is when we are making the textile. If you just Google and see how many liters of water gets used to make denim, for instance, 1 yard of denim will equal so many gallons of water. Then you'll realize how much of good drinking water that we may be wasting in doing textile. So I think that's a key one for us to consider in the future. I will move to the next slide. So then what are the solutions? How do we stay sustainable? Some of you will know we recycle PET bottles for polyester, for instance. So cotton, yes, we take it out of the cotton fields, but all sportswear and most of the world's fabrics today are synthetic. And one of the key components for synthetic recycle is the PET bottle. So for many, many years, we felt that PET bottle recycle is good. That means we are collecting ocean plastic, we are collecting plastic from waste bins, and we are recycling it and then making the pellet and again making polyester. So now for many years, for the last 15, 20 years, that was a good practice. But is that a sustainable practice? You still need plastic bottles, right? So that means it's a vicious cycle. You have found a solution for plastic. You are now recycling it and making fabric. But at some point, now we are going to, maybe on the other side, you are saying, let's drink water out of glass bottles. Let's drink glass out of sachets which are recyclable. Let's not use plastic. So then what happens? This becomes a conflict. On one side, you are saying, let's reduce plastic drinking water or consumption in plastic goods. On the other side, you are saying, we need plastic for recycling for polyester. So isn't there a clash there? There's a clash. At some point, the world will say, we think we need to make PET bottles for recycled polyester. So we don't want to be there, right? So that is then artificially making plastic for you to recycle to make polyester fabric. So because of that, what's the fabric of the future? It's more biodegradable, with food waste, with tree barks, or any waste that comes which are degradable. And today, there are lots of fabrics that are getting researched and launched, which are degradable. So just an example, a plastic bottle takes almost 400 years to degrade if you dig a hole and put it. Some plastic bottles can take up to 400 years. But there are some fabrics today which are made out of food waste and fruit waste and tree waste that might degrade in maybe 4 months. So look at the difference between a garment that you will put in the ground, which might biodegrade in 4 months, versus a plastic bottle that may take 400 years. Now, if you make a garment which is from plastic, that T-shirt also may take, because it has some synthetic component, it will take some time to degrade. So we are working as an industry to make sure that biodegradable materials is the way of the future. On the right, I have a few points here. You all would have read or learned or watched on TV that in the world there is a lot of resale of garments and repairing of garments, which is becoming a thing. In Europe, in France, if you take the main cities of France, now you find a lot of resale shops, garments which are almost brand new. They have restored them, and people are saying, I'm not going to buy an expensive jacket. I'm going to buy a jacket which has been used in the past. So some people are also thinking that that's one way of being responsible. So I will stop there. I spoke about this slide on what are the futures of biodegradable material, PET bottle recycle, the good and the bad of PET bottle recycle, and resale as a way of some people showing that they are responsible, and investments on sustainable yarns and things like that, which a lot of companies are working on. So if we move to the next one.
Next slide, please. Okay, so Malik, moving to the next question. So finally, if you can guide us to like what is the forecast for next 3-4 years when it comes to fashion business, and especially in Sri Lanka, is it a good time to start a fashion business, or if so, what kind of categories that they should focus on?
So yeah, so few things about Sri Lanka. Whether we like it or not, Sri Lanka will always be a small market. So whatever business that you're launching, you have to first consider that we only have 22 million people, and there are maybe only 4 big cities that you may have your flagship stores. We'll say Colombo, Kandy, Kurnagal, or Galle, or a few places. You may have a few big cities that you have a presence in. Then you have to consider whether you can sell online, whether your delivery channels are available. If that is so, then you have a upper hand on a company where you can also deliver. But then you have to consider returns. How do we manage returns? How do you manage damages? How do you price it? Things like that. But I'll just go through this slide from the left. If you're starting a fashion brand, first is if fashion is your passion, it has to be grounded with a plan. What's the problem you're trying to solve? What is the gap in the market? So now any business, that's how we start. You first see, what am I trying to solve for the consumer? What is, as a consumer, I feel there is a lack in the market for something. Is it a certain style, or there are no Sri Lankan denims, or there are no, maybe there's an opportunity for batik to be on silk? What is that opportunity that we are, what's the opportunity in the market? So the gap in the market is what I've said there. Then authenticity is important. Each brand has its own identity, and people resonate with authenticity. That means I know brand X has a certain way of how they do linen, for instance. They are good at cotton linen, and they have pastel colors, and that's the authenticity. And when you think of linen and pastel colors, you can only think of that brand. How do you create that, in the market? So authenticity is very important. Endorsements is important. So we see the moment you do a brand, you find a brand ambassador, right? So some brand ambassador might be an athlete, might be an actor or an actress, might be a business personality, might be somebody, if you are sending a sustainable brand, ocean conservationist, or somebody who's doing some responsible work. So you'll find a brand ambassador that the audience will want to listen to. So if you find somebody who's doing responsible work to clean the ocean, and you're linking that person's work, career, and that person saying, I endorse this brand because they do this brand in a very sustainable way, people will listen. So that's what's happening around the world. The influencer-led brands in the world have hurt the big brands. So if you remember in the first few slides I mentioned, there are some smaller brands that have come into the market that are hurting the big brands. That's because those influencer-led brands have a big audience that are listening to them. Some of it might be hype, but hype is also good. It might not be 100% accurate, but that's okay. Hype can bring you the money also. I've used two Sri Lankan brands here, so, two names that everybody knows now. So Carnage, Moose. So these guys have found a gap in the market, and people are buying into them. So they are doing some good work. And if you are following them, you can see that they are moving places. They're going places. So sustenance is a key. You start a brand, you can't start at once like a soda bottle and finish in 2 years. You have to figure out how to sustain this, how to make sure that your designs are kept refreshed, how the engagement with the consumer kept refreshed, how the service level is kept refreshed, not only during the opening year, when you're one store or when you're 10 stores, how do you maintain that standard of service, or checkout counter, return policy, anything? How do you sustain that as you get bigger? So I think the sustenance is a key, and keeping your fixed cost. So rented building versus buying a building, for instance. Rented building you can always give up. Inventory management in a warehouse, you're building warehouses or you're renting warehouses. These can all mean money at the end of the day is the key. So that's how to say successful. I think inventory management in the middle there, right, at the box at the bottom, is the number one thing that will either make a business or break a business. So anybody who's an entrepreneur on this call, who is already having a brand, or who is managing a brand for someone, or who is planning to do a brand or set up retail, inventory management is the one word at the end of the day. That's the one that's going to make or break. Did you buy the right fabrics, right colors? Did you buy the right garment that the people want? And is it in the right size? And is it available? If you buy the ratios of, so I say small, medium, large, XL, and you have made more of small, medium, but the people are wanting XL and double XL, and if you didn't read that, you have an inventory problem and you're missing out on opportunity also. So two problems. One problem is availability of what you need is not there. And the other problem is, if you had that size, you would have sold more. So, it's actually not one problem, it's two. So you have to manage your inventory. Again, I mentioned about buying multiple styles or finding out that few styles that can go deep and run for longer. So these are a few things, Dinusha, that I can say just on the call for today. But there are so many other ways, and how you can manage this. But Sri Lanka is an exciting place for a few reasons. Though we are a small country, if we do our tourism right, there are people, you and I, when we travel overseas, we always like to shop. So if tourists come here, we must create that environment where they also would like to shop. And when they are traveling here, do they travel here and buy international brands? Or if we have something, a proposition which is valuable, they might want to buy that authentic Sri Lankan brand, whatever it is, whether it's a sari, whether it's a blouse, whether it's a batik shirt, or a linen, or a twill pant, or a sportswear. Sometimes, if there is a local proposition, a tourist would like to also have a look at that. It's not always that we would like to buy the international brand. So there is opportunity, and I'm happy to say that in the last 2 years, there's been a lot of entrepreneurs who have come through and made use of the market condition where the imports were restricted.
One
Dinusha,
small question,
yeah.
Malik, like if you are a Sri Lankan brand, like how to position yourself, especially when it comes to the pricing, because Sri Lanka is a very price sensitive market. So in Europe, maybe most of the brands are luxury brands, but is it okay to launch a luxury brand in Sri Lanka, like targeting a very niche Colombo centric audience? So, as a start, do you think that you need to focus on the island wide, like the middle income to high income, everyone? What would be
Yeah.
the some tips for position yourself.
So I think positioning is very important. It depends on the offer. So like I said, if you have a very high-end printed silk dress and you're going to make few of it and it is going to be dressy and the price of the dress is 30,000, you still have a market for that. But you'll be selling less. Versus if you sell a dress which is 7,000, you'll sell more with a slightly different fabric and you can go beyond Colombo. So it depends on how the target audience. I know both ends do work. Both ends of what you just asked, there is opportunity for both. So it's not either or. I wouldn't say that it's one or the other. There is opportunity for both. It depends on the proposition that you have and the value that you create by that product. So there is maybe a Western province or a Colombo elite or people who can afford, who like, if you have only 10 pieces of the same and they know that, they will buy it. There may be a sari which is 200,000 rupees, they will buy it. So that's one way to go. But your proposition, your branding, the designer's name, has that designer made a name for herself or himself in the market? Everybody wants to have one of those. I would like to have a piece with Dinusha. Jayalat is the designer. I would like to own one piece. I like to say when I wear it, somebody says, "What is this?" It's a Dinusha Jayalat. Have you created that name for yourself? Yes. So then you can go deep and expensive, but it's not either or. You have opportunity in both ends.
Okay. Thank you, Malik. Is there slides left?
I think I think we should stop here.
Yeah.
I think everything you saw in this slide also we spoke about.
Yeah.
For any questions, I think we have some time. So I think it's good to hear what the people have to say.
Yes. So let's directly move to the Q&A session. Then there are a few questions from our chat and also from the FL Live. So Tarka is asking, are there any cultural shifts or changes in consumer behavior that you believe will heavily influence fashion trends in near future?
So there's an international trend. Let's talk about that first. So the abaya trend, the Islamic world trend is huge, right? So 20 years ago, there was no actual designs and fabrics and garments that catered to that. Of course, yes, in that market, they did their own design for their own markets. We'll say in the Middle East, Dubai or Saudi Arabia or anywhere. But now that is going global. There's a huge design shift. It is accepted. There is sportswear. There is abayas for gym, for yoga, for all of that. So that is one new big trend that I see in the world that is accepted. The second one is athleisure. This word athleisure came with leisure wear and athletic wear together. All of us wear athleisure, though we don't talk about it. We wear clothing which are sports related, but we are wearing it for casual, just to go out, to look cool and things like that, or to just feel comfortable. And nowadays with work from home culture and coming into the office only a few times a week, or going from ties and cufflinks to I'm wearing a t-shirt today and I go to office in this t-shirt. So now these are accepted. So casual clothing for work has become a huge thing around the world. So that would have mean that some of the tie sales and dress shirts that we used to wear to work. I used to wear cufflinks, and a tie, and I used to be running a factory. Thankfully, the factories that I worked in were air conditioned. But imagine you're in a cufflink and a tie, long sleeve shirt in Sri Lanka in 36 centigrade weather. You're running a factory as a general manager 15, 20 years ago. To today, even in the corporate boardroom, I can go in this t-shirt. So huge shift of more casual and casual inspired wear in the world.
Okay. Thank you, Malik. The next question is from Kanchana. Tech is everywhere now. How do you think is going to influence the fashion trends of tomorrow, and how can businesses use it to their advantage?
So very good question. I think we didn't touch on tech on the presentation, but tech is everywhere now. Tech is like an underlying thing, right? Tech is not a thing that you bring separately. It's how we do business now. So that's probably why I didn't put it there. We talk about AI. Everybody talks about AI. Just let me tell you a few things that will influence in the business of apparel and retail. Consumer demand, reading of consumer demand can now be done through tech. They will tell you what sizes, colors are getting bought, when that demand will come, and when you need it. So that is extremely important. Remember, we spoke about inventory management. So to manage inventory, if you have data, what better way? So data for inventory management will be number one. Why is that? Because the retailer wants to sell at full price. When you mark a shirt at 6,000 rupees, you like to sell 100% of your inventory at 6,000 rupees. If you buy wrong and then you have to do year-end sale or Aurudu sale and you're trying to sell it for 2,000, then you're barely managing your costs. So inventory management using data is number one. Number two is design. So the fashion designers on the call, there are so many tools that we have in the world today. You don't have to recreate styles from scratch. There are various tools and archives and virtual prototyping where it's sustainable. You don't have to do two garments and send it, garments around the world. You can do it virtually. So design timeline, design effort can be 50% reduced or even more using digital. So I just talk only about these two, the product creation and digital in the front and data managed inventory at the end. These two are two game changers. There are so many more which I can talk about in the future also.
Yeah. We'll go for final two questions now. There's a question from a fashion brand called Chakadi.lk. I'm a handloom manufacturer and a seller in the beginning and growing stage. How can I find the perfect market for exporting?
So handlooms may have multiple ways. We have a couple of very successful handloom businesses in Colombo. Some are very, very old and traditional. They have made a name for themselves, and some of them have also gone international. So there is scope for handloom. It's very authentic. Remember, we spoke about authenticity. It's very Sri Lankan. It's a cottage industry almost. So you can sell that angle, and of course, you should get help from associations like the EDB, for instance. They will help you, and they will take you out to the world through their shows, and maybe position you as a government. We have associations that can help you to do that. But yes, handloom is very authentic to Sri Lanka, and I think it's a very exciting one. It has a very traditional look and feel, and we have some very, very successful handloom brands in Colombo that you can also learn from. So some of these things you don't have to start from scratch. There are some other people who have already been successful. Study and find out how they became successful, and maybe you can add some twist to it and make it a little different.
Okay, thank you. There's a question from Kanishka Deshan. This question is old money or the great luxury? Any idea about this trend?
Tell me again, old money
Or the great luxury? Any idea about this trend? I'm also not clear about that question.
old money, old money, or
Maybe
the
he's asking like the cultural shift, like the luxury brand kind of targeting the mass market or
okay.
something similar to
So
that.
yeah, so let me just say something general. Maybe it might resonate. In the bad times in the world, last couple of years, the luxury brands didn't get hit. So that we should say something. Now, today we spoke about, what price points should we sell garments which are more expensive, a little more niche versus the cheap ones. So I think there is an answer in the world. The answer is the Gucci's, Pradas, and Louis Vuittons in the world didn't go down last year. YSL, all the top brands, in fact, they grew. So that means the world's rich, maybe 1% of the world, is still buying heavily at that expensive tier. So maybe that's also a strategy in Sri Lanka, right? So I don't know whether the question was there because there is money. There is not money for everyone, but the money is going to one side. Fewer people have more money. So that means we'll say the Chinese new rich. I think every 5 days there's a billionaire coming out of China. India is going to be the same. So these people will want to buy the luxury watches, the luxury bags, the luxury cars, and there are people who are going up that ladder towards that. So one thing is aspirational brands, we call them, is when I am going up in society one notch, I want to be seen wearing a Rolex watch. The next one is I want to be seen driving a certain car. So the retail or the supplier has to now capitalize on this. Who is this person, and what can you sell to him? You have to figure out, how to capitalize that.
Okay, Malik, now it's 6 p.m. now. I think it's a high time to end the webinar. So, thank you very much, Malik, to joining with us. Is there anything to say to the audience finally?
Yeah, so it depends on the audience. I would like to say, in 1 hour, I think we spoke about a lot of things. Some of these things we can go into lots of detail and talk for a long period of time. And depending on who you are, whether you are a new designer who's getting in the industry, or experienced designer who wants to go to the next level, or somebody who wants to start up a brand in Sri Lanka, or you want to start manufacturing for export brand. I think if you're all here, I think we had something that we covered for everyone. And most of all, Dinusha, thank you for the opportunity to do this on a Sunday and give as much knowledge and guidance to our folks on the call. So thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, my pleasure, Malik. So, thank you very much again. And also, thank you for Malik and his team, Mahen and Amani. So, thank you again. And with the audience, we'll see you with another webinar. Stay in touch with us.